Hey everyone, so glad that you joined us again. My name's Morgan. I'm the pastor at Mosaic Chapel, and glad that you have joined us today to talk about forgiveness and offense. I think we can all agree that forgiving people and overlooking someone's wrongdoing or offense to us is extremely difficult. So yesterday we talked about a few points in our message on Easter Sunday, talking about how we need to forgive. We laid down the biblical basis of forgiveness and overlooking offenses that people have done to us. Jesus taught how to neighbor, and if we want to be a good disciple, then we should mimic our lives to look like the life of Jesus. And so Jesus, even when he was hanging on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." In other words, the offense that they've created towards me, the offense that they've put on me and they've beat me and they're actually murdering me right now unjustly, Father, I forgive them, and I ask that you would forgive them as well. And once again, I think we can all agree that's a lot harder to do when the rubber meets the road versus just talking about it. It's easy to talk about things. So I want to give you a few practical things real quick that are biblically based on how you can address offense in your life and forgive. The first thing you have to do is to recognize what the offense is. You have to recognize what it is that's making you feel a certain way. We talked yesterday about how no one can control your emotions but you. You're the only one that can control the emotions in your life that are built inside of you, designed there by God. So recognize what it is. That's the first step of anything. And I mean, with addiction issues, recognize you have a problem, right? It's the recognition. So the first thing that we have to do is recognize what the offense is. The second thing we have to do is address it. This is a two-part action here. So we have to recognize and then address. And we're going to look at how to address it in just a moment. But I want to make a book recommendation to you. About a year or so ago, I read a book, Crucial Conversations. I'll throw a picture of it right here. It changed my life when it comes to crucial conversations. Most people avoid conflict. And the book points out that conflict is neither good nor bad. It just is. Every day, people have conflict with each other. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it may be a multitude of people. So there's a way that you can have conflict in a healthy way. So recognize what the offense is that needs to be forgiven, that you need to work on, and then address it. So I want to go to the Bible. Here's Matthew chapter 18. These are the words of Jesus. Once again, as a disciple, we should mimic our life after Jesus. So this is what Jesus said. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. So here's the first step, and this is where most people break down in forgiveness and offense. They never address it with the other person. Most of the time, you're offended, you're hurt, and you don't want to go to that person because, number one, you've never been taught how to do it. You've never been taught how to address someone in a healthy way, how to have a healthy conversation. The second reason is most of the time you're so angry or bitter about it that if you go in, it's not going to be good because you've tried to address things with people before. You've tried to address the offenses and it didn't go well. You got upset. It caused a big fight at Christmas or Thanksgiving, and you got your buns burnt, and you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. Anytime anybody offends me, I'm just gonna deal with it. I'm just going to internalize it, and that's how you've lived your life. That's not healthy. Jesus said, if someone offends you, go to them. Actually, just go to them and have a conversation about it. Here's the thing about it though, is sometimes you may have to give it a little time to pass. If it's like really fresh and you're still angry every time you think about it, you may need to wait because you've not gotten over it yet. It's still too soon for you. So give it a little bit of time, but go to that person. Have a mature, honest conversation. Back to Matthew chapter 18, that was verse 15. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. Not And so the language here, this is the NIV, if that person confesses it, which just means if that person is willing to have a conversation and admit they did something wrong. You know what I mean? They have to actually say, hey, yeah, I realize that I did offend you. I've had this happen to me many times, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I didn't even know I offended you. I am so sorry. Now, what we can't do is when we're being accused of the offense, we can't get defensive and then say, well, I didn't do that. Well, yeah, this person has an emotion. They felt a certain way. So if we're the one that calls that, we need to recognize once again and then address it. It's all about recognizing and addressing. So we go to that person and have, once again, a subtle, calm conversation. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, you can grab your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad, your best friend to have these conversations. In my opinion, as a pastor, I believe it's best if you brought in a spiritual guidance person or a counselor. And I believe that this is a great basis for biblical or spiritual counseling. If you bring in your best friend who's always going to take your side, or your wife or sister or whoever brings in their best friend, the conversation's probably not going to go very well. So recognize once again the offense, what happened, and then address it. I highly recommend finding someone who can do therapy on the situation, to counsel in the situation. If you're having issues like that, bring one of those people in and have a mediator between you. Once again, very biblical. Recognize, address. Go to that person. If not, bring in a third party, a counselor. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. Now here's what Jesus was saying. After you've done your piece, after you've done everything that you can to make the offense right, number one, let's realize this is not talking about the offender. This is talking about the person that's been offended. As an offender, you can go to that person and say, look, I realize I did offend you. I'm so sorry. But if they're not ready for it, you don't just walk away and leave it. No, you give it some more time and then try again. And if that doesn't work, give it a little bit more time and try again as the offender. As the offended, if the person who offended you won't have any conversations, if they don't want to do therapy or a counseling session, you pray for them. And I think in our day and age, this was a little bit different in Jesus' context. He was saying bring them to the church, but there are some people I've heard of doing that. They go to a pastor or a community group leader. It's important that you find, number one, a mutual party to help reconcile, but also someone biblically, maybe a pastor, someone who both parties respect as a spiritual authority in their life. But if they refuse to admit they're wrong, if they refuse to do anything about the offense that they created toward you, then Jesus said, it's okay. There's other relationships that you can invest in. We're all the time investing in something with our time, with our talents, with our treasures, with our money. And so this is one of those times that Jesus said, hey, if someone offended you, if they really did, if it wasn't just talking about your haircut or the way you cook, my goodness, come on, let's get over those type of things, right? We're talking about bigger offenses. So if someone truly offended you, you've went to them, you've tried counseling, you've been praying for them, maybe even brought in a pastor, and they still don't do anything, and it's just time to walk away. Invest in a new relationship. Now, if you're married, if this is a marriage thing and there's an offense there, the only thing biblically that Jesus said is about adultery. So if there are other issues in your marriage, don't walk away. It's a covenant relationship. It's a covenant relationship between you, your spouse, and God. Same thing with your brothers and sisters and your mom and dad. If they've offended you and you've forgiven them, truly forgiven them, do everything in your power to rectify that relationship. And if they still refuse, then give it some more time, sit back. But once again, it is so important to forgive people. And I said this in the message yesterday, but here's what you need to remember. And we don't know who gave this quote, but it's really, really old, probably 100 or so years ago. But unforgiveness is like drinking poison, hoping the other person dies. it's killing you inside, even though you're wishing the other person is dead. So find a way to forgive. Put these steps in place. Recognize and then address. Recognize, address. If you do that, I promise you will find a way to overlook those wrongdoings and rectify relationships.